everybody. We'd like to welcome you to our Counterpoise podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Samantha Adams. I'm also joined by my other two co-hosts. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, everybody. My name is Malik Foster, a co-host for the Counterpoise podcast.
And I am Everett Stevenson on your other third co-host. And this week we have a pretty interesting topic. This is one that we looked at and seen that was inspired by a conversation that Kevin Samuels had with Nicki Minaj recently. And the topic basically talks about how, we've seen that there are some disparities in some of the philosophies that he raised. And when speaking with Nicki and speaking with celebrity in particular, then when we see when he's kind of talking to the day-to-day or his normal clientele. And so we wanted to talk about that. Like a lot of times we see this happen in the corporate world all the day. Some people call it code switching, where it's almost like, you speak one way around certain individuals and then you speak another way when you get around others. So we wanted to talk about that. I heard recently another term for it is called capitulation, if you will. It's almost like you get into a situation and then you turn into wanting to switch it up into another one based on what dynamic you have in there. And so we wanted to talk about that because we feel like if you have a philosophy that says one thing and you are saying something different, does that work? Is that okay? Or are you switching it up based on, the audience that you're speaking to? And is that fair, even if it doesn't go towards the philosophy that you may be speaking towards on your day-to-day message? So we wanted to talk about that, and we have some other little topics that we have today to bring you guys. So let's get right into it, guys.
So some of the examples of people switching after they gain media attention, fame, etc. And Kevin Samuels, we wanted to highlight that because it seems like he's been gaining a lot of popularity, especially this year. Especially last year, he's starting to gain some popularity, but this year he's really taking off. He's been doing more interview style type of things for the Brittany Reiner situation, other celebrities from Love and Hip Hop, now Nicki Minaj, right? So he's really becoming more of a mainstream person. So we've noticed there's a lot of people, once they become mainstream, they start to kind of switch and alter their message, which I can understand a little bit, but it's that consistency. Like, hey, I understand it's a different room, so you have to speak a certain way. You have to approach things a little differently, but you still want to overall hit your message. You don't want to change how you talk to one group with another group and switch up your message. Like, oh, okay, this is what I'm saying to you about them, but once I'm in front of them, it's like a totally different thing. So that's the code switching that he's talking about, based off of the fame that you might get from it, the money that you might get from it, and things of that nature. So do you want to jump in here, Sam? I know you're.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to make sure I also clarified it. We're not necessarily referring to the responsibility people have once they gain a certain level of notoriety or fame or whatever have you, based on the things that they say, right? Because there is definitely, we've talked about this before on this podcast, there's definitely a level of responsibility that folks have when they get to a certain level of notoriety about the things that they say, regardless if they truly believe the things that they say or not. Like you can lose money doing that. Like look at the baby when he did the rolling out and he went up there and he was talking about people that suffer from AIDS or are HIV positive, and he just gave his opinion. Regardless if you agree with that opinion or not, he's responsible for that opinion. And so we're not necessarily referring to that aspect of it. We're more so referring to, switching up a little bit. You know what I mean? Because like the question then becomes, would you interact with these people the same way if they weren't who they were. Like if they weren't famous, or if they didn't have money, or you didn't believe them to, or you believed them to have a whole lot of money. If you're talking about a Nicki Minaj or Cardi B or whatever, if you're talking to them and you know that they're famous for their music and things like that, would you be addressing them the same way if Nicki Minaj was still working at Red Lobster, or if Cardi B was still a dancer? You know,
yeah, let me jump in here real quick.
Hold on real quick. Let me just finish. The question is, would you still approach them the same way? They could still be making money. It may not be the same, you know, and I know definitely it depends upon their attitudes and the things they say to Kevin Samuels, for example, but would your approach to them essentially be the same?
So, yeah, I think, you know, within this part of the topic right here, it's interesting for a few reasons. I know we all can attest to, you know, the way that we're living maybe in today wasn't always the way that we lived 5-10 years ago. So within that regard, some of the concerns and some of the things that we may have worried about at one point might not necessarily be the same type of concerns or issues that we have today. And for that reason, I think, you know what I'm saying, you can maybe negate some smaller nuances and maybe say that, all right, you guys have to say, you could say that now I'm going to have to look at different sets of problems. So I'm going to have to, you know what I'm saying, have a different set of rules that I'm living by. So in that regard, I kind of can understand how, you know, a situation like when dealing with certain individuals that maybe have a different type of net worth, how you can maybe curtail your context a little bit different. Like the context of the conversation, I guess I can say, would be a little bit different. But I think the core message that, like you were saying, Malik, should still stay the same. Because like you said, if you're looking at someone and you believe what you believe, that should go throughout. And I know one thing a lot of people say too is when they, you know, kind of get in a position of fame or whatnot, it's like they respect the people who just still look at them as individuals, who are not starstruck and all and trying to see pictures, trying to run up on them and ask for autographs. It's more like, you know, if you could keep your head moving and keep and say, you know, hey, what's up? I noticed you, I recognize you. I want to give you your piece, but and keep it pushing. You know, people probably appreciate that a lot more because it's like now I can feel comfortable in my place and not worry about somebody asking me for something, and I can just enjoy myself and my time off. So I think if you treat people like regular people, they'll respect you more. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, you know what, you still holding me to the standard that you will hold anyone else to, regardless of what I have or what platform I have.
Exactly, because the thing is, for example, with Kevin Samuels, like the way that he approaches people, like you can definitely make the same message without being rude or, you know, disrespectful or whatever. I do get it. Some of the people that get on his show come out there with the foolishness, you know what I'm saying? And so he gets right there with them, you know what I mean? But then there's some people that don't necessarily come at him that way. And I get the fact that he feels as though in order to get through to them, he has to approach it a certain way, but he's not keeping that same energy, right? Like just because, you know, I once saw something, it was on social media. It said something like, a lot of times people ask you what you do so that they know how to approach you. You see what I'm saying? And that shouldn't be it. You should approach people the same just because they're people. The fact that I'm a lawyer or the fact that my nephew works at Chipotle, I shouldn't be treated differently just because I'm an attorney and he works at Chipotle. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
You can talk to us the same, give us the same energy. I don't have to be propped up here and spoken to a particular way, and he needs to be spoken down to because he works in food service. And I think that right there is one of the biggest issues that people typically have with Kevin Samuels. And when you see him doing that with people like Nicki Minaj or Cardi B or anybody for that matter who has a higher stature, right? It makes you look at them like, well, why? What makes them so much better than me? No one's better or above anybody else, in my opinion. So, you know, I don't know if this was his goal, right? To eventually change as he grew in his own notoriety, or if it's just happening organically for him. I I agree with the both of you guys that I don't think that he should be changing his form.
Well, I think to answer that a little bit, since I've been following him a little bit, I think that's been part of his plan. I understand you want to grow and evolve, which I understand that. It's like I don't have a problem with he did a commercial with Future essentially, right? Or whatever to promote Future's album or whatever he got going on, right? So there was that. There's nothing wrong with that. Cool, get your money, get your paper. But if you're gonna be doing these interviews with celebrities, black celebrities, right? Because Kevin Samuels' whole thing is about bringing black people together, black families, black relationships, right? That's his main point, right? That's his main audience, black people, like he always says. Then he should stay consistent with the message from the average black person to the a higher value black person, right?
Elite, right?
Yeah. So and even with these celebrities, he still should be consistent with his messaging, right? So getting into some of what we're going to talk about later, as far as the interview what he did with Nicki Minaj, sometimes black people when they seek an opportunity to achieve that fame, they switch up their original purpose and intent to acquire that fame, to acquire that money. And I just hope that's not what Kevin Samuels is doing, but it's kind of looking that way, the way he presented himself in some of these interviews. And the direction he's taking his platform, he's going mainstream essentially. And when you go mainstream, you can't be consistent on the message that you would when you were more grassroots, especially when
you can be consistent. You don't have to change. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well,
look at Tyler Perry.
95% of black people tend to change when they.
But look at Tyler Perry though, right? Tyler Perry has not changed his demographic. He hasn't changed what he's doing. He hasn't changed. All he's done is make more money and do it on a bigger scale. But he hasn't stopped. Like when people started criticizing him for Medea and all that, he kept doing it. You know what I'm saying?
It was making money too. Like, but
right. But remember, you have to understand.
Tyler Perry is like, why is a black man always got to be in a dress or something? Like, that's just my criticism.
Well, no, because Tyler Perry didn't start that, right? Like,
let me get
I'm not saying he started.
Let me just jump in real fast, and y'all both can go back with it. But because I think one of the things that I think that y'all both are saying, in a sense, is when you go mainstream, for whatever reason to get mainstream, you're going to have other sponsors or you're going to have other relationships and contracts with people that's going to require you to have to watch what you say. And in a sense, we get this recently to see the Whoopi Goldberg situation in particular. And as she's made some statements about what was taken to be anti-Semitic, and now she had to sit down for 2 weeks.
But she's Jewish.
Either way, they just didn't like what you said, so you need to sit down, and that's how that goes.
Yeah,
and I think that's how it is in certain times when you go mainstreams, where you can't say some of the things that you may feel in your heart or think. And I think another thing to that last little point that I want to make is why they'll things such as just YouTube, things such as having other role models like we've seen with Nick, with Eric Thomas as another one individual, where we've seen people who are able to keep their message and go and build their brand up to become successful. And for me, that's just enough motivation for me, especially seeing the black male do those type of things, and Eric Thomas in particular, to be able to do it in a realm in which, you know what I'm saying, it was consistent. His whole thing was just like relentless work ethic, but also like, seeing it said in a positive manner. So when you see people entertain, you have a choice in how you choose to do that. You can entertain people with a certain message, or you can entertain people and and do things that may be considered to be vilified, as how they look at most things within black entertainment, with rap or things of that nature. But or even sometimes even the movie content, there's always a struggle. There's always some type of, abuse or some type of setting set that, or something like that to kind of background that story. So I think like nowadays, we have a chance to kind of bring the content in the media that we want to see, and create that type of environment. And so that's why I say it's a little bit different, but I do understand that you know, with people trying to get more and more successful and and have a bigger and bigger platform, that comes with the responsibility that ultimately looks like it has people having to switch up their message or not being able to feel free to speak in what they want to.
But see, and that's the point that I'm making. It's one thing for you to find yourself being more responsible for the messages that you're putting out there. It's something totally different when you're changing your message from its core root. Like, you start off a particular way, right? This is the message that you had. This is the message that that drew people to you. That was the attention grabber. This is the way that you dealt with things, and how and what you spoke on, or how, whatever the genre is, right? In Kevin Samuel's circumstance, it's more about interviewing people and talking about bringing people back, Black folks together. With Tyler Perry, it's his movies. You see what I'm saying? I mean, I hear what you're saying, Malik, as far as, okay, you don't want to see Black people in a dress. Okay, that's fine. But
Black men.
Tyler Perry did it. Black men, okay, Black men in a dress. But I mean, number one, he wasn't the first one to do it, right? Because not for nothing, Eddie Murphy did it, Martin did it. And
that's the whole point, though.
That's the point.
But let me finish what I'm saying. Let me finish. The thing about it is, that's not the point that I'm making. The point that I'm making is, despite the criticism, he continued to stick with that formula. And look at him now. He still has attained a very high level of success with sticking with the formula that he believed worked for him, right? Regardless if you agree with it or not. Same thing with Kevin Samuels. Regardless if you agree with him or not about the way that he goes about doing things, the things that he says, whatever, he's now changing the formula. At least that's what it looks like to me. You see what I'm saying? And it's like, that's not what got you where you are. What got you where you are is the formula that you already had. Why are you changing it? You're changing it because of who you're talking to now. It's not necessarily just having that responsibility for the things that you're saying because you're at a certain level of notoriety now. It's also too because who are you talking to? Because now, if you come talking to these rich people, like how you talk to poor people, you're going to get canceled, right? Because poor Black people, they're just like, whatever. They'll either get on there and argue with you, or they're just not going to deal with you. You know what I'm saying? Because, of course, within the Black community, there's not enough unity to stay consistent in canceling anything. We ain't been able to do that since a bus boycott. So, you know what I'm saying? And I really believe that, it's not necessary to change the format or the formula if that's what got you there, right? Because what got you there typically is what's going to keep you there.
I agree with that statement of don't switch up your formula, but I do want to say that I think, like, again, in today's society, there has been a bigger chance for the revolution to be televised, in a sense, because individuals who are looking for the content and the information that certain individuals are producing, they're going to link together. They're going to find things, especially if they're good at marketing and branding. We've seen that happen with the rise of the Qs and all the Q movement or whatnot, and the insurrection and everything else that came through with some of the
the QAnon.
Yeah, excuse me. You said it to be the Libertarian Party. And so forth. And these are things that happen on, like I said, platforms like the Discords, the Telegrams, and all of these other, WhatsApps, platforms that allow people to communicate from all over. So, I think to the point, like, no, you can get your message out, and your message can be heard if you stick to it and you let it grow and you take the stairs. But a lot of people want to try to take the elevator, and that elevator comes with, connections to certain individuals. And when you do that, you're not going to get it. Because to your point, to my understanding, I don't think Denzel has ever had to be in any type of drag role or anything like that, or Samuel L. Jackson, if I'm not mistaken, either. But I do understand that these individuals, again, 20, 30-year careers, you know what I'm saying, in the industry, and they may have possibly had to slowly progress, as we've seen other artists like Martin, Eddie come up a lot faster. So, like, we can say whatever we want to say with that, but I think that's what goes with that. Robert Townsend, another individual who will use his platform to create things like a Tyler Perry had, but he also had a different message. And, you know, it wasn't always supported as well as it should be within the community, because that was another great, you know what I'm saying, entertainer in the African-American community, and who also made productions with a message that had something positive to help people kind of move forward and think as well as be entertained.
Well, my thought here is this, that, you know, if your plan is to grow yourself and to enrich yourself, I think, especially when you're a Black person, especially when you're kind of getting to that media, Hollywood, television type of stuff, you got to partially kind of sell out a little bit, right? That might be kind of like an understood part of the game with Hollywood right now, due to who owns and controls everything, right? So I get some of that stuff, but when you own your own platform and control your own stuff, you don't have to do all of that, right?
Right.
And, you know, Kevin Samuels is an example of, you know, he had a consistent message, but when he talks to different people, it's a different message, right? So it's a lot like other actors, right? Danny Glover, he was saying some wild stuff. Even President Barack Obama, he was talking one way, and then he started doing other different stuff, whether you agree with some of his policies or not. Everybody understands he switched up. So once Black people become more famous and gain power and a little bit more notoriety and fame, they tend to switch up or sell out a little bit. So I hope this isn't the case with Kevin Samuels in particular. But it's leaning towards that way, in my opinion. I think it's just a start. Like right now, he hasn't completely sold out or anything, but you know, we're gonna kind of get into it. I guess we could switch over to the topic at hand, like our reactionary thoughts of Kevin Samuels in the interview he did with Nicki Minaj.
Yeah, but before we do that, I do want to just say something. I don't know if I necessarily agree with the statement that you know, people like Martin or Eddie Murphy coming up quickly, because they didn't, right? Eddie Murphy just started off very young, right? He was like a teenager. He was still in high school when he was on Saturday Night Live. Martin went through a bunch of things before. Think about it. We would see him on hold on, let me finish. We would see him on things like House Party and stuff like that way before, and that was after, like, he'd already had a career doing stand up and all that other kind of stuff. That was well before he even got his TV show. So, you know, it may look fast in the grand scheme of things, but it wasn't. But
I'm not saying that.
Hold on. But to the point, I know the point that you were making. I'm just saying that also too, you know, to the point that Malik was making about having to sell out a little bit. I don't think you have to. I don't think you have to do anything. I think that in order to if you'd like to get there quicker, you might feel the need to, but you don't have to. You know what I mean? And that's the reason why I was bringing up somebody like Tyler Perry, because I saw an interview where he was talking about crossover, and they were like, "Why don't you do more crossover stuff?" He's like, "For what?" Because there was nothing wrong with the way I was going about doing it, regardless if you like his stuff or not. There was nothing wrong with his formula. It still got him to be as successful as he is. You know what I'm saying? And so I just wanted to go ahead and just make sure I said that. I think it's just different for different people and based on what the choices that they make in order to get there.
Absolutely. Well, see, I think some people will argue that there was something wrong with the formula simply because, again, that whole statement of, you know,
formula.
Tyler Perry's formula of having to be a Black man, having to wear a dress in order to receive success. Now, what craziest part about it was the biggest part of the success came from our people coming to go see the plays, watching the plays as they go on like tour, and then it grew to the movies and everything else like that. So like people definitely supported it, and it wasn't to say like that. So that was the great part about it. But the part that like kind of makes it seem like it was able to catch on to the mainstream side is the argument that we were just saying, that sometimes how it looks like in order to make it, sometimes guys have to kind of get that seen as being a Black male doing something kind of feminine, and then you kind of can get to the $20 million, the $10 million.
I think that you're talking about more so about the messaging though.
Okay, hold on, let me just finish that though. That correct, but you have to a lot, to the Malik's point, you almost have to say, okay, I'm going to give this up. Kind of like what Chappelle spoke on this as well, by saying like, yo, no, I'm not going to do that. Tell them I'm not doing this on this script. Like, that's not what was written in. Now you're going to try to make this little change on the back end. I won't do it. I'm not doing a film if that's what it has to be. And so he spoke on this type of thing too. And we also seen his career have to use the stairs, turn down 50 to come back and fight for your stuff against them to get your money. And hold on, Sam, let me just finish that last little thing. And all I'm saying with that is so you don't have to necessarily have to give it up. You do have to understand that if you don't give it up, that it's going to take you a little bit longer, but you got to be okay with that because you understood that that's what comes with the territory. Just like it's what comes with the territory when you're trying to help your people, it might not catch everybody, but it's okay because you're going to catch some. And those some that's going to catch it are going to be the ones that's going to run with it and they're going to feed the others. Everyone else going to do what they do. You can't help that. And
but the problem
thing though about you had said something about not necessarily Eddie and them coming up a little bit faster. I'm not saying that they necessarily came up like overnight. I just meant by we see like even Sam might not necessarily get all of the just due that he's supposed to have, but he's someone that's been in the game a long time. You said Danny Glover. I'm trying to think of
I said that.
But there's other guys that's definitely we've seen them have long careers, but maybe not necessarily get the payout that they were supposed to get as fast as some other actors may have, and that's what I mean by in reference to that. You know, and I understand that he's quicker than you know what I'm saying. These other guys that we were referring to.
Right, but I understand that. But when you're talking about their careers, right, you got to look at what was going on in their lives. When you talk about Tyler Perry, when Tyler Perry started doing Medea, first of all, he was mimicking his grandmother. It's not like he was just putting on a dress on some being like Miss Doubtfire. He was mimicking his grandmother. And on top of that, when he started doing those plays, Tyler Perry was homeless and living in a car, right? Whereas when you had other actors, they weren't necessarily in that type of a space. You know, so when you have your back against the wall, the choices that you make might be a little bit different, as opposed to just trying so hard to get your foot in the door.
Well,
those are two totally different.
It is not a singularity as far as the.
No, it's not. It's not. He's an example. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it'd be different if he was the only Black guy that put on a dress and did a play. But it's like they do that. It's common.
But the flip side to that, right, is when you're talking about somebody like Kevin Samuels, he's gaining notoriety by tearing people down. Black women and Black men, mostly Black women, because that's mostly who calls into his show.
I disagree.
Right?
He doesn't tear people down.
Right, but hold on, right? So, I mean, you disagree with that, just like I disagree with the statements that you guys made about Tyler Perry, because that's the reason why I said it's more so that issue right there is more about messaging. You see what I'm saying? But the context of this conversation is more about, should you switch up? If this is what got you here, right? Regardless if I agree with the messaging or not, I do believe that Tyler Perry tears lots of Black women down. I think that there's a way to tell somebody that they're going about something the wrong way without having to tear them down. Like telling somebody, what do you think you look like on a scale of 1 to 10? Like you grading people. First of all, beauty is subjective. So if somebody thinks that they look like they're an 8 when they get out the shower with fresh face and no makeup, and you think they look like a 3, that's just a difference of opinion. So you tearing somebody down, telling them, oh no, you're a 3, you're crazy, you ain't no 8. Like, all right, if that's how you feel, cool. I get that there's a whole lot more that goes into it. I get the fact that there's more context to it, all of that. But things like that are very subjective. You see what I'm saying? And so because it's so subjective, you are technically tearing people down. Now, and that's not going to the context of the other things that he's talking to them about as it relates to, and I get it, men are visual creatures. You see what I'm saying? But it goes deeper than that. But we don't need to dig all heavily into that because we do need to get to our reactionary thoughts. Matter of fact, I can probably segue into that. For example, with Kevin Samuels, when he had his interview with Nicki Minaj, he posed the question that he posed to all the women that come on his show. How do you rate yourself when you get out the shower, fresh face, no makeup, yada, 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 on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most beautiful? and you cannot use 7 because 7 is the most common number. She said, what number did she?
She rated herself a 7.
No, but he said when you can't use 7, she changed it. I can't remember what number she gave.
He said like
it was lower than the number he did. I think she said like a 6, and he was like, no, you're a 9. Well, and it's like, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, basically she felt like she was a 7, but
he said don't use 7 because that was the most commonly used number.
Yeah. She turned it back on him, like, oh, what do you think I am? And he was like,
yeah, and he said no, he said a 6. I don't think so. You're more like a 9. And he starts getting into, the symmetry in your face and da 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 da. Like, now she was still working at Red Lobster. Would you be like that with her? If she didn't, would you start talking about the fact that she's had plastic surgery? Oh, you see what I'm saying? Like when you start getting into those things.
That's my thing. Like Kevin Samuels, he does get on women about, like, some of the certain accessories they have, and the way the hair is, and their appearance, right? He's an image consultant, right? So, and if you're talking about natural beauty, because he does talk about natural beauty, I didn't know he considered like any plastic surgery and all of that stuff to be, added into his equation, right? Because I mean, most average everyday people aren't getting plastic surgery done or any work done to their body, which is Nicki Minaj is well known to have done, right? So it's like, okay, she's had work done, she said her weight and height. He didn't mention anything about that stuff. Like I was like, wait, she said she's like 165 or whatever, her certain dress size. He wasn't kind of going in on her with her height and weight and stuff like that. That was like, dog, like Kevin Samuels, man, you kind of switching up there, buddy. Like the height and the weight and the dress size ain't all matching up according to what his.
She didn't know her dress size, remember?
Yeah, no, she said a 4.
No, I thought she said at first she wasn't sure, and he didn't give her no grief about it.
No, she went with a 4, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So like she definitely gave the weight too. So so I was like, okay. So that's why I was like, he's kind of changing up, and then he was like you mentioned, Sam, with the beauty, with the eyes, the symmetry of the eyes, how they're slanted and the lips, like, people like Asian features, but if they're not on a Asian person, it's really attractive. I'm like, what? I'm like, what is this? It's totally different. So go ahead.
I agree with that part with y'all. I agree with that part with y'all, but I also have to say this too. Let's not overlook the fact that Nicki said she was that 6 or whatnot and rated herself a little lower.
No,
because we also know too, though, from her lyrics and things too, she's always considered to be one of the baddest and this, that, and the third. Like, of course, the baddest was considered to be Trina, was how she branded herself. But Nicki was like Queen Bee or something like a Barbie or something like that.
Barbie.
Yeah, so Queen Bee was Lil' Kim. Sorry about that, but
and we all know Barbie dolls are plastic. They have a certain,
but to also define beauty as well, we're considered to be a beauty, like whatever, trendy beauty, whatever you want to call it. So, so I think we can't sit there and let that slide under the way too. So it was entertainment, and that was one of the things that I want to say too. At the end of the day, we can't always get caught up on this and thinking like all of this is gonna be, you know what I'm saying? Like so much like this ain't the only way the truth. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's entertainment.
But people down for the purpose of entertainment.
I'm sorry.
I mean, that's fine, but I feel like there's other parts.
You don't necessarily have to switch up with your message just to entertain. I can agree with that statement. But I just want to say, like, sometimes I don't necessarily look at it all to be like, oh, you know what I'm saying? This like, that this is so real, or is there so much, a little bit of purity in some of this or not? Because like we said, and that's something for another conversation. we've seen Kevin do
the way
it.
the interview was, he was like kind of fanboying a little bit as like the interview progressed. So he talked about rating her, his response, he seemed kind of gushing over, and then she was asking why don't black men date black women or whatever, right? When it got to that question, and he went on to say, oh well, we're not raised to be together, right? Usually he'll say like, well, black men wants black women, but look how they behave. They're not presenting themselves as wife material. Like he goes on like the issues, like the reason why they're not together. But here he's like, well, we're not raised to be together. And that was it, right? He didn't go into the details about
wait a second.
behavior.
I'm not trying to defend him, but I think this is one of the times where I might have to say we have to look at that. Because if it's Nikki asking that question, right, and we're talking about maybe now looking at celebrities, a lot of times people always argue when you look at celebrities or some people like that's in the entertainment or whatever field, a lot of times they might have, not a lot of times, sometimes the people that you do see on TV may have spouses from outside of their race. And so from within that topic, you know what I'm saying? I think Nikki might be asking that question like, well, why do I look like when I look at some of the, guys that may be in my type of earning bracket, they seem to be dating, outside the rest. And I mean, I'm not even to say that it's only them, because again, you can see it happen at all walks of life. You feel me? But I think she could be asking from that standpoint, and Kevin could be simply saying that, again, something that we always think, that it's just not always taught to people to say, I should want to love my people, and I want to have this, and I want to further.
I mean, I hear that, but he's just not keeping the same energy. That's the bottom.
I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree. I just wanted to throw an alternative viewpoint on here so that we can have.
And also, too,
I get
right. But also, too, I'm also curious about whether or not he chose not to tear her down about her weight and size and stuff based on not necessarily the plastic surgery, but the fact that she recently had a baby. I mean, it wasn't super recent, but it was recent enough.
Where that's probably why he didn't say anything. I get that. But I was just saying, like, everything, like.
But he doesn't do that for everybody, though. You see what I'm saying? So,
but and that's supposed to be a 9, though. If he agreed with her like she was a 7, I would have been cool with the assessment. But he's like, she's a 9. She's like close to perfect.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. I'm saying. If she was Onika from Red Lobster, would he be giving her that same type of energy and she just had a baby?
Because he says Beyonce's an 8. That's what he says.
I mean, that's what I mean about beauty being subjective, right? Because some people, Beyonce is a 10 and Nicki Minaj is a 5 or a 6 or whatever. You see what I'm saying? And that right there is the very point that I'm making about it being subjective, beauty being in the eye of the beholder, right?
Yep.
And there's just some people like that. Some people may think Halle Berry is a 10. Some people might think she's like a 4. You could think that person that thinks she's a 4 is crazy or foolish or whatever, but that's just what they see. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that he walks a dangerous line when he does that. But that's my personal opinion about the context of what he does. But just, looking at it from a higher level, I just think he should really just not change his formula. If this is what got him here, he should keep it to,
And another point I do want to point to you guys is when I was watching the interview was that he had brought up what the men need to do, right? Like when it came to the men portion, he was very detailed. Like he went on what they need to do, right? Like, hey, you guys need to work these hours. You need to be on your purpose, stuff like that. He's very detailed on what the men need to do to step up to make these relationships work. But when it came to the women, he was like silent. He didn't really mention much, like what he would normally do, right? So that's what I mean by Kevin Samuels was switching up. Like he wasn't going through his normal motions on what he would say to, the person he's interviewing. And, we're starting to see a trend of this, like with him specifically, that, from the Brittany Reiner interview, now he interviewed another girl from Love and Hip Hop. So this might be his new thing, interviewing celebrities, but not keeping the same message and consistency on what you're saying. Go ahead, E.
I was gonna say we gotta also remember too though, like everybody's not situated the same. So although we want to continue to say your message need to be the same, your message need to be the same, your message need to be the same, absolutely. But again, everybody's situation is not the same. So if we have somebody who does have a platform, then maybe she needs a man who's not going to be necessarily saying he on his purpose and who might be able to say, listen, baby, you got the talent that, you know what I'm saying, that can save, you know what I'm saying, the generation, how can I be of service and how can I, you know what I'm saying, help make our family structure be good, and so that, you can continue to do what you got to do. Maybe that's the type of man she needs, you know what I'm saying? So he might not necessarily keep the message that he keeps with another woman who might need a man who needs to be on purpose so that she can feel comfortable following him because he likely may be able to have an opportunity. Now, again, a lot of times that seems to be a different situation where in our current state, a lot of women are being able to, you know what I'm saying, earn more. But the fact of the matter is, if there's men that's out here doing their thing and do have purpose, then he wants to say, like, you know what I'm saying, ladies, you should be able to recognize that, feed into that, lean into that, and figure out a way that y'all can make that build. And I mean, if that's overall the message, cool, and I can see it being different, but I do agree, ultimately, keep the core message the same as much as you can for who you're dealing with and what you're dealing with. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, it's like if your woman making $1 million, why am I about to sit here and tell you she need to be sitting down? And while I don't necessarily solely agree with these statements, like she should still, you know what I'm saying, respect you as a man and maybe what you have going on. But it might be better suited that you work on figuring out how you can help y'all get to 1.5 as opposed to you doing what you doing and add an extra what? She make $1 million, you made a million one. You know what I'm saying? It's like 1.1 with your little 100,000, or you could have helped push her to get to another $500,000. What would be better suited? You feel what I'm saying? So it might need to be a different message for that type of situation. But again, if that's not the situation, you know what I'm saying, and you're a man who was able to get yourself going and on your plan and you was able to get that, because again, that's what most women will like maybe, is a man that has their self going, has themselves a little bit more established, have things going for themselves so that they can kind of stand behind that and say, okay, cool, I'm with that. I can see what you're doing with your life and I want to get behind that and see if you can help me get some of that going for myself, or if I already got that with myself, I just want to align with that because now we can do more. I'm with it. So that's my little final thoughts, even if not everything goes, because ultimately, like, that's how I feel about code switching. Although I don't think that it's great, I ultimately feel like, everything for what it needs to be. You know what I mean? Like, keep to your core beliefs. So, you know what I'm saying? But you also have to look at things. You have to, like Bruce Lee said, be water. That doesn't mean that, you know what I'm saying, you too fidgety that you have to stay on one position, because if that's the case, then everything won't work for that one situation. You know what I'm saying? So you might have to look to see how do y'all bend and how does she still respect you even though she may be earning more. That's something that you have to look at as well, because you know what I'm saying? A lot of women may get into that position and feel like, whatever, it's about me, get your shit together with somebody else, you know what I mean? Or do she able to say, you know what, I recognize that I got somebody who believes in me, who's standing behind me, who's supporting me, who's giving, you know what I'm saying, to help me get there. So yeah, that's what I think about it.
So my final thoughts pretty much are just keep the same energy. You know what I'm saying? When you have a formula that works for you, it doesn't make sense to change it. I mean, I get why people do it, unless that's what you choose to do, right? But just understand that you're going to lose people in the process. Everybody's not meant to stick with you, but when you're talking about what got you there, you want to make sure that you do what you got to do to stay, to keep that longevity. And typically, when the formula don't change, that's what people don't get lost. If that's your goal to change, whether it be to code switch or crossover or whatever it is. That's fine if that's the goal, but just be mindful about your audience, regardless of what the message is. Because like I said, we don't always necessarily have to agree with the message. That's why we have the option to follow you or not follow you. But just know that when you switch up like that, you might very well lose people, because people are gonna think you're funny. They're gonna think you're finicky. They're gonna think that you're not consistent. And so I think it's important to just keep that in the back of your mind when you're making these types of changes. That's just my take. That's my final thought. I'll let Malik give his, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. Yeah. So my final thoughts about this switching up is like this switching up, selling out culture needs to come to a stop. I guess part of the solution is, building up our own platforms to where, we can actually have these conversations in spaces, just like Kevin Samuels is doing. But I think maybe he had another agenda. So if you don't have another agenda and you're trying to help the community, that's something that will really help, right? Because when you're selling out and switching up, everybody's going to be thinking like that's what you have to do to achieve the level of success they want. Like, this is what I have to do to become a multimillionaire. This is what I have to do to get the fame and notoriety. But if we build up our own industries, our own platforms, we'll be able to, be ourselves and still achieve that financial success that we want to achieve. So, I mean, in the case of Kevin Samuel's situation, I hope it's just, he was just doing it like this is like temporary stuff. It's just what he does for the interview styles. I get it. You're in front of the celebrities. You got to behave in a certain way, but you can still be a little tough and ask them some tough questions. Not everything so softball stuff, because they are Black people and they're still part of the Black community. And there's a lot of stuff that they're doing wrong. A lot of those celebrities. And I mean, there might be some stuff they're doing right, but we all see the wrong stuff. It's always in the news. So that's my final thoughts right there. We need to build up our platform, support each other, so we can also get the money and also not have to sell out in order to achieve that financial success we want to achieve. Support each other, support the Black businesses, and keep it moving. And I want to talk about the Black Business of the Month, which is the Mad Millionaire Online. Mad Millionaire, excuse me, she has a YouTube channel, the Mad Millionaire. She helps you with starting your business, work at home business. She's successful with Toro and stuff like that. She also has a Facebook group called the Global Wealth Network. You can join that group, stay up to date on what's going on over there to help you with your business, work at home business or Toro business, and even some credit repair stuff as well if we need assistance with that. So that's it. That's once again the Mad Millionaire, and that's the Black Business of the Month.
And I just wanted to close this out with the motivational minute. Stephen Covey said, to change ourselves effectively, we must first have to change our perceptions. And I figured that would be a pretty good quote for today, understanding that, everything isn't always meant to be the same. So if we're going to make changes, we have to make sure that we change our perspective. Our perspectives are what guide us. You know what I'm saying? And as it relates to the topic for today, there are different perspectives about how Kevin Samuels moves, or other people like him. It's not just him. He's just one person. As far as how they function and how they operate, we gave several different examples. And it's not necessarily, and it may be about the messaging, but also too about the way you handle business. And so sometimes those perspectives need to be changed, but sometimes they don't have to. And so I think that it's important to just understand that the goal is to always grow. Right. And if the goal is to grow, sometimes you have to take an inventory of what your perceptions are and decide whether or not you need to make those changes. But just know that when you make those changes, the things that you're sacrificing when you make them. So we wanted to thank you guys for tuning in with us today. We had a very great spirited discussion. And so again, we thank y'all again. Make sure you tap in with us. All of our socials are going to pop in at the very end. And make sure you also check us out on Wednesday for What's Up Wednesday, and every Saturday at 1 o'clock for our podcast on YouTube.